When you have Secretary of State Powell saying, let's abide by the Geneva Convention, and then folks on the other side, we're told, saying, wait a minute, if we hold them to that kind of status, then all they'll be required to give us is their name, rank, and file number.
Yeah, it seems to me this is an argument that is really consequential. One of the things we clearly want to do with these prisoners is to have an ability to interrogate them and find out what their future plans might be, where other cells are located. Under the Geneva Convention, you are really limited in the amount of information that you can elicit from people. It seems to me that given the way in which they have conducted themselves, however, that they are not, in fact, people entitled to the protection of the Geneva Convention. They are not prisoners of war. If, for instance, Mohammed Atta had survived the attack on the World Trade Center, would we now be calling him a prisoner of war? I think not. Should Zacarias Moussaoui be called a prisoner of war? Again, I think not. And yet I understand what Secretary Powell is concerned about, and that is we're going to be fighting this war with people who are special forces, not people who are generally in uniform, and if unfortunately they somehow become detained, we would want them to be treated in an appropriate way consistent with the Geneva Convention.
So is the Secretary of State walking a fine line here legally? He's not asking that the United States declare these men as prisoners of war right now. He's just saying let's abide by the Geneva Convention in the meantime.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways that makes sense. I think they clearly do not fit within the prescriptions of the Geneva Convention. You have to remember that after World War II, and as these protocols were being developed, there seemed to be widespread agreement that members of the French resistance would not be considered prisoners of war if they had been captured. That being the case, it's hard for me to see how members of al-Qaeda could be considered prisoners of war. And yet, I understand Secretary Powell's concerns. We want to make sure that our forces, if captured in this or some other conflict, are treated in a humane way. And I think ultimately that's really the decisive factor here. How are people who are in our custody going to be treated? And those in Europe and other places who are concerned about the treatment of al-Qaeda members should come to Camp X-Ray and see how the people are in fact being treated.